My name is Velthari Salmos, and I write this with hands that still shake. When I remember what I saw, I have been a diplomat for 90 long cycles. I have spoken with 11 different civilizations. Across the stars, I have signed treaties that ended wars and opened trade between worlds that once hated each other. I am not a young creature, and I am not easily frightened. But on that day, near a small blue world called Earth, I learned something that broke every belief I had ever held about who is strong and who is weak in this galaxy. It began in a quiet briefing room on Concord Prime. The walls were a soft gray color, the lights were low, and the air smelled faintly of the dry flowers our council members favor. I sat across from the coordinator, a tall, pale being with deep eyes, and I felt insulted. Before he even spoke, I had been told this meeting would be about my next assignment. I had hoped for something important, a border dispute perhaps, trade war between two of the larger member worlds, something worthy of my long career. Instead, the coordinator slid a thin folder across the table toward me. And GT, snorts. And GT, it was so thin I almost laughed. New civilizations always come with thick files full of warnings and numbers and fear. This file was barely 6 pages long. Most of the pages looked like apologies. Saul, the coordinator said, a bipedal mammal species, newly contacted, pre-tier 2 industry. They sent their first message into space only 40 cycles ago, and that message was a song about a small underwater boat painted yellow. We need someone experienced to handle the protectorate agreement. I stared at him. I did not know what to say. A protectorate? They were sending me with my 90 cycles of service and my 3 signed peace treaties to oversee a backward little world that still fought wars over lines drawn on maps. Coordinator, I said carefully, surely a junior diplomat would be better suited. This sounds like a training assignment. He looked away. That was my first warning, though I did not understand it at the time. The coordinator never looks away. He once stared down an angry warlord for 6 straight hours without blinking. The last 3 diplomats refused the post, he said quietly. The one before you resigned. The one before her requested a transfer to a methane swamp. The one before him simply stopped answering our messages and now grows fungus on a moon somewhere. And GT, snorts. And GT, we need someone with experience, someone who will not be rattled. I should have asked why 3 of my colleagues would rather grow fungus than work with these creatures. I should have asked many questions, but I was proud. And I was annoyed, and I want to prove that I was better than those who had failed before me, so I nodded and took the file. That evening, I read every page in my private quarters, sipping a cup of warm root tea. The information inside was almost embarrassing. The Snorts humans had only just begun to leave their own planet. They used chemical rockets, the kind we had abandoned 20,000 cycles ago. They had no faster-than-light travel of their own. We had found them, not the other way around. A scout ship had stumbled upon their system while mapping a dust cloud, and the humans had been so surprised that they nearly fired on the scout before realizing what it was. The file said they had no psionic abilities, no mind speech, no ability to sense the deep currents of space. They communicated by making sounds with their mouths and by drawing small shapes on Flat surfaces, they ate dead plants and dead animals, and they sometimes drank rotted fruit on purpose. They had over 200 different governments on one single planet and could not agree on which one was in charge. By the time I closed the file, I felt almost sorry for them, these poor creatures. They needed the conquered. They needed our guidance, our protection, our wisdom. I would go to their world. I would smile at their leaders. I would offer them protectorate status, and they would weep with gratitude. It would be the easiest assignment of my career. I told myself this as I packed my robes and my translation crystals. I told myself this as I boarded the embassy cruiser. I told myself this as we slipped into the long dark currents between stars, and I was still telling myself this 3 weeks later when we dropped out and slid toward the small yellow sun the humans call Sol. My sensor officer was a young creature named Korath. He was bright and careful and not given to drama. He had served on my ship for 15 cycles and had never once made a mistake. He sat at a station as we approached the fourth planet, the small gray moon that orbits Earth, and I heard him make a small choked sound like someone who has swallowed wrong. Ambassador, he said, his voice was very thin. Their moon is moving slightly on purpose. I looked up from the diplomatic notes I was reviewing. What did you say? The moon, their moon. It is not in the orbit recorded in the file. It is about 400 km off, and there is a slow correction happening. Something is pushing it, something planned. I frowned and walked over to his station. The numbers on his screen meant nothing strange to me at first. Then I looked closer. Then I looked at the moon itself on the main viewport. It was indeed in the wrong place, and the energy readings around it were not natural. They were too clean, too steady, too deliberate. The file said no significant orbital engineering. I told him. My voice sounded confident. Inside, something cold was beginning to grow. The file is wrong, Ambassador Korath said. He did not look at me. And there is something else. The asteroid belt between the fourth and fifth planets. The pattern is not natural either. Whole sections have been rearranged, tidied. Some of the larger rocks are missing entirely. I told him he was tired. I told him to recheck his instruments. I told him many things, and I believed none of them. But I was the ambassador, and I was proud. And I had decided already what kind of world this would be. I would not let strange readings change my mind. We continued inward toward Earth. As we passed Mars, the red planet that sits fourth from their sun, Korath made another sound. This time he simply pointed at the screen. There were lights on Mars, lights in patterns, not the random scattered lights of small settlements, but long, bright lines like the veins of a leaf spreading across the dry red land. There were structures there, many structures. And in orbit around Mars there were ships, small ones. I told myself cargo haulers. The file had said the humans had a tiny presence on Mars, a handful of research stations. This was not a handful of research stations. This was a working world, a second human home. How big are those ships, Korath? I asked. My voice was still calm. I am very good at sounding calm. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Ambassador, the smallest one is larger than our cruiser. The largest one is the size of a city. I went back to my chair and sat down. I told myself there must be an Explanation: trade ships, empty hulks. Old wreckage left from some accident. I told myself these things because the alternative was that the file was not just wrong but completely, deeply, dangerously wrong, and I was flying toward a world I did not understand at all. When we reached Earth orbit, the truth could no longer be ignored. There was a ring around the planet, not a natural ring of ice or dust, but a built ring, a great curving structure of metal and glass and soft glowing light that wrapped around the whole world like a crown. Ships moved along it, lights blinked in careful patterns. It was not finished. I could see that, but the part that was finished was already larger than any structure the conquered had ever built. The file had not mentioned this. The file had said the humans had a small space station with 6 people on it. I asked Korath very quietly how many people he thought the ring could hold. He looked at his instruments, he looked at the ring, he looked back at his instruments, then he said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Ambassador, millions. It is built to hold millions." A signal came in from the surface. It was warm and polite and offered us landing coordinates at a place called Geneva. The voice that spoke was a human female. She introduced herself as Director Ngozi Akanjowiwila, and she said she was looking forward to meeting me. She said the Earth Council was eager to hear what the conquered had to offer. I told her I was eager to meet her too. I told her this with my best diplomatic warmth. I did not tell her that my hands were shaking, that my sensor officer was pale, that I was watching a moon move on purpose and a ring spin around a planet that should not have been able to build it. I did not tell her that I was beginning to suspect, deep in some old animal part of my mind, that I had not been sent here to give these creatures anything. I had been sent here to learn something, and I was already learning it, though I did not yet know what it was. We prepared the shuttle for descent. I put on my finest formal robes, the deep blue ones with the silver trim that I had worn when I signed the Villana Accord. I practiced my opening words in the small mirror in my cabin. I told my reflection that I was Ambassador Velthari Soundmez, that I had handled 11 civilizations, that one small backward mammal world would not unsettle me. My reflection looked back at me with eyes that were not quite as confident as my words. Korath came to see me before I boarded the shuttle. He stood in the doorway and would not quite look at me. "Ambassador," he said, "permission to speak freely." "Granted. I do not think we have the full picture. I think we are missing something very large. I have been looking at the energy signatures from this system, and they do not match the file at all. There are power outputs here that should not exist on a world like this. There are construction yards I cannot identify. There are ships moving on patterns I do not recognize, and the patterns are too organized to be civilian. Ambassador, I think we should be careful." I wanted to dismiss him. I wanted to tell him he was imagining things, that young officers always see threats where there are none, that this was a simple protectorate meeting with a simple backward species. But I had served with Korath for 15 cycles, and I knew his face. He was not imagining anything. He was telling me the truth as he saw it, and the truth was making him afraid. "Stay alert," I told him. "Keep all instruments running. If anything changes, contact me at once." He nodded and stepped aside. As I walked Passed him toward the shuttle bay, he said. One more thing very quietly, almost to himself. Ambassador, the file said they only just learned to leave their planet, but I am reading construction at the outer edge of their system, past the gas giants, past the cold rocks. There is something being built out there, and I cannot tell what it is, only that it is very large and very far away, and humans built it. I did not answer him. I walked into the shuttle and sat down and stared at my hands until the doors closed. Then I closed my eyes and tried to remember the words of my opening speech, the polite phrases about protection and partnership and the gentle hand of the conquered. The words felt very small, now smaller than the moon that moved on purpose, smaller than the ring around the planet, smaller than whatever was being built out at the cold edge of this system. The shuttle began its descent. Through the small round window, I watched Earth grow larger, blue and white and green, almost achingly beautiful, a small, charming world, a pretty little planet of pretty little mammals who sang songs about yellow underwater boats. A small voice in the back of my mind, an old voice that had kept me alive through 11 negotiations, whispered something I did not want to hear. It whispered, "Be careful, Velthari, be very, very careful. The file is wrong. The file is wrong about everything, and you are about to find out how wrong it is." I told the voice to be quiet. I straightened my robes. I prepared my best diplomatic smile. The shuttle broke through the clouds, and Earth came up to meet me. The landing field at Geneva was small and tidy and entirely too clean. There were no soldiers waiting for me, no rows of weapons, no displays of mine. There was only a polite, welcoming party of 7 humans in simple clothing, standing in a soft line on a gray paved circle with a single quiet flag flying overhead. The flag was pale blue and showed a stylized image of their planet, seen from space. No weapons on the flag, no fierce animal, no symbol of war. Just the planet, small and round and blue. I stepped down the ramp slowly, my robes brushing the cold air. The lead human walked forward to meet me. She was shorter than I had expected, perhaps 2 heads shorter than me, with dark skin and dark eyes and hair pulled back in a tight knot. She wore a simple dark green jacket and trousers. She smiled at me. I had read about the human smile. It involves showing the small white bone tools they keep inside their mouths. My species find this gesture deeply alarming. In our culture, showing your teeth is what you do before you attempt to eat someone, but I had trained for this. I held my own face still and offered the formal greeting. "Ambassador Velthari Soundmoss of the conquered of civilized worlds," I said, through my translation crystal. "I bring greetings from the coordinator and from the member worlds, Director Ngozi Ademi of the Earth Council," she replied. Her voice was warm and even. "Welcome to Earth. We have been looking forward to your visit for some time." She extended her hand. I had read about this too. The humans grasp each other's hands in greeting, a custom from a time long ago when they wanted to show that their hands held no hidden blade. I extended one of my own 3-fingered hands and let her grasp it. Her grip was firm but gentle. Her skin was warmer than mine. "Thank you for the welcome," I said. "I look forward to our conversations." "Please come with me," she said. "We have a vehicle waiting. The council is already gathered, but they understand if you would like to rest first. I would prefer to begin at once if that is acceptable. Of course. We walked across the gray circle toward a small dark vehicle. As we walked, I looked around carefully, trying to learn as much as I could in those few short steps. The buildings around the landing field were old and made of stone with windows of clear glass. They did not look like the structures of a powerful civilization. They looked like the kind of buildings I had seen on 100 developing worlds, quiet, simple, plain. But there were details that did not match. The vehicle that waited for us made no sound at all, not even a hum. The pavement under my feet was not stone or concrete, but something else, something that seemed to slightly grip my boots so that I would not slip. Lights overhead were sunlight, not electric lights brought down through some kind of system I could not see. Small things, almost invisible things. But each one whispered to me that this world was not what the file had described. We climbed into the vehicle. Director Ademi sat across from me. She did not speak to a driver. The vehicle simply began to move, smooth and quiet, lifting slightly off the ground. Tell me, Director, I had trying to sound casual. I noticed a ring structure around your planet as we approached. Is that a recent project? She smiled again, that strain, tooth-showing smile, but somehow it did not feel threatening this time. It felt almost shy. Yes, it is fairly new. We started building it about 50 years ago. It is still not complete. 50 years, I repeated. That is impressive construction speed for a developing world. We were in a hurry, she said simply, and did not explain further. I let that pass. I had been trained not to push too hard in the first hour. I tried another question, and the lights I saw on Mars, there seemed to be quite a substantial presence there. About 800 million people currently live on Mars, she said. Most of them are second or third generation now, born there. The first colonists went out about 60 years ago. It took some time to get the atmosphere thick enough for them to walk outside without suits, but we managed. I did not respond at once. I could not. The file had said the humans had perhaps a few hundred researchers on Mars. Adame had just casually told me that there were almost 1 billion people living on the red planet, breathing its air, walking on its surface. 60 years to make a planet habitable. The conquered had never managed this. The conquered did not even know it was possible. Forgive me, I said carefully. I want to make sure my translation crystal is working properly. Did you say 800 million people on Mars? Yes, about that. The census from last year was 804 million, but we have grown a little since then. I sat in silence as the vehicle glided over the city. I looked out the window. Geneva was small and old and quiet. I saw parks, I saw lakes, I saw children playing in a green field, children with bright clothes and shoes that lit up when they ran. I saw a market where humans were buying fruit and bread and small live fish swimming in tanks. It looked in every way like a peaceful old town on a peaceful old world. And somewhere overhead, 800 million humans lived on a planet they had made breathable in 60 years. We arrived at the council building. It was a long, low structure of pale stone with tall, narrow windows and a flat green roof. Inside, the halls were quiet and warm. We passed through several wooden doors, each one held open by a polite young human who nodded as we walked by. Finally, we entered a round chamber with a curved wooden table in the center and 12 chairs around it. 11 of the chairs were already filled. The 12th was waiting for a dame. The humans at the table stood as I entered. They bowed slightly. They did not show their teeth this time, which I appreciated. I took my place at the head of the table in the seat that had been prepared for me. A dame sat opposite me. "Ambassador," she said, "allow me to introduce the council. From my left we have Margaret Holloway, coordinator of civilian affairs. Beside her, Dr. Henry Cavendish, director of scientific cooperation. Then Alumide Fashanu, director of industry. Then Beatrice Norrington, who handles our agricultural and ecological matters. Then Pavel Krastev, who oversees off-world settlements. Then Amani Whitaker, director of education. Then Aldous Pemberton, who serves as our chief legal advisor. Then Ruth Ackerley, coordinator of public health. Then Frederick Aldridge, who looks after our internal infrastructure. Then Caroline Thistlewood, who handles our cultural affairs. And finally, at the end, our senior advisor, Elena Pritchard, who has served the council longer than any of us. I nodded to each of them in turn. They each nodded back. I noticed at once that no one in the room held a title that suggested military matters. No defense minister, no fleet commander, no general. The file had said the humans had militaries, many of them scattered across their nations, but none of them sat at this table. This struck me as unusual. On most worlds, the diplomat from another star is greeted by the warriors first. The fact that no clears throat warrior sat here meant one of two things. Either the humans had no warriors, which I now strongly doubted, or they did not consider their warriors to be part of this kind of meeting. They had separated their warriors from their councils. They had decided that talking and fighting were two different jobs. I tucked this observation away. It might mean something later. "Council members," I began, "I bring you the greetings of the conquered of civilized worlds. I have traveled far to meet you, and I am honored to be the first formal ambassador to your young civilization." The old woman at the end of the table, Elena Pritchard, made a small sound. It was not quite a laugh, but it was close. The man beside her, Aldous Pemberton, looked at her sharply, and she became still again. I noticed this. I did not understand it, but I noticed it. I continued, "The Conquered is a great alliance of 43 member civilizations, spread across nearly 2,000 worlds. We have existed for over 100,000 cycles. We maintain peace between member species. We share trade and knowledge, and we welcome new civilizations as they reach the necessary level of development." I paused to let this settle. The humans watched me politely. None of them seemed impressed, but none seemed dismissive either. They simply waited. "Earth," I continued, "is a young world. You have only recently begun to leave your planet. You have not yet developed faster-than-light travel of your own. You have not yet unified your governments. There is much you do not know about the galaxy, and much that the galaxy can offer you. The Conquered is prepared to offer Earth protectorate status. This means that the Conquered will guarantee your safety from outside threats, will provide gradual technological uplift over the next 40 cycles, will assist in unifying your global governance, and will welcome cultural exchange between Earth and the member worlds. In return, Earth would accept the protection and authority of the conquered and contribute a modest tribute to the common funds. There was a long silence. Margaret Holloway, the woman seated nearest to Dame, leaned forward and asked in a perfectly pleasant tone, "Ambassador, may I ask a small question? For clarification." "Of course. When you say protectorate status, would Earth retain control over our own military forces?" It was a careful question, asked gently. I considered my answer. The standard conquered protectorate agreement required all member protectorates to disband their independent military forces and place defense matters entirely in the hands of the conquered fleet. This was standard. It was how the conquered prevented wars between protectorate worlds. In the standard agreement, I said, protectorate worlds transfer their defense forces to conquered oversight. The conquered fleet then assumes responsibility for protecting your world. This is for your safety. It allows your world to focus on growth and prosperity rather than the burden of maintaining your own warriors. Margaret Holloway smiled and nodded as if I had said something very interesting. She did not speak again. Dr. Henry Cavendish spoke next. He was a thin man with silver hair and small, round glasses, and the technological uplift. Ambassador, could you describe what that might include? Of course, over the first 10 cycles we would introduce clean energy systems based on quantum extraction, then over the next 10 cycles, basic life extension, medicine, then advanced agriculture, then planetary climate control, then in the final phase, sublight propulsion technology so that your ships might reach the nearer member worlds. How interesting, Cavendish said. He wrote something on a small pad of paper. He did not seem either eager or hesitant. He wrote the way a man writes, who is taking notes for a record, not for personal use. The questions continued for nearly 2 hours. The humans asked about trade, restrictions, about cultural exchange, programs, about how disputes would be settled. They asked careful, thoughtful questions, and they took careful, thoughtful notes. They did not argue. They did not refuse. They did not say yes either. They simply asked. At one point, the old woman, Alina Pritchard, finally spoke. Her voice was thin but clear. Ambassador, in your long career, has any world ever declined the offer of protectorate status? I smiled kindly. No senior advisor, no developing world has ever made such an unwise choice. The protection of the conquered is a great gift, and even the proudest civilizations have understood this. She nodded slowly. She wrote nothing down. She simply looked at me, and her old eyes were calm and steady, and I felt for the briefest moment as if I were the one being studied, not the other way around. After 2 hours, Director Adame suggested we pause for a meal. The council members rose, bowed, and filed out of the room. Adame led me down a hallway to a small private dining room with a round table set for 2. The meal that was served was strange to me, but not unpleasant. There was bread, which I had read about, made from ground grass seeds and baked in fire. There was a deep red liquid in a glass, which Adame explained was fermented from fruit wine, she called it. I sipped it carefully and found it surprisingly good. There was also a soft pale cheese and small green leaves dressed in oil and salt. As we ate, Adame asked me about my journey about my home world, about my family. She was warm and curious and seemed truly interested in my answers. I began to relax. This was just diplomacy. This was just a charming small world, handling its first contact with the larger galaxy with admirable grace. Then near the end of the meal, a young aide came into the room with a tray of small sweet cakes. She set the tray down and began to leave. Before she reached the door, she turned back and looked at me with bright, curious eyes. "Ambassador," she said, "may I ask you a question?" Adame looked at her with the expression of someone who would correct the young lady but would allow the question for now. I smiled and nodded. "Of course." "In your council," the young aide said, "when a member species joins the conquered, are they allowed to keep their own ships, their own fleet?" I considered the question. "Member worlds keep their merchant fleets and their civilian transport ships. Their military fleets are integrated into the conquered fleet." "Integrated," she repeated. "Does that mean controlled by the conquered or just coordinated with the conquered?" "Controlled," I said, "for safety, so that no member world might use its fleet against another member world." She nodded as if this had confirmed something she had already guessed. "Thank you, Ambassador. That is very helpful." She left the room. Adame sighed gently and shook her head. "I apologize. She is very young. She should not have asked." "It is no trouble," I said. "Curiosity is a fine quality in the young." The Adame looked at me for a long moment. Over her glass of wine, her dark eyes were thoughtful. Then she smiled, and there was something different in the smile, something I could not quite name. "Ambassador," she said, "before you submit your recommendation to the conquered, would you like to see our fleet? I believe it is customary in your protocols for an arriving ambassador to inspect the defense forces of the world he is meeting." I felt a small thrill of delight. Of course, she had thought to offer this. It was a quaint custom, but a polite one. The humans must have read our protocols carefully. They must have wanted to make a good impression. I imagined a small parade of perhaps dozen ships polished for the occasion. Lined up in orbit, I would tour them. I would say kind words. I would compliment their little vessels. It would be a pleasant gesture, a small kindness from a wise visitor to a young world. I would be delighted, Director, I said, whenever it is convenient. Tomorrow morning, if that suits you. The fleet is not always easy to gather, but they are within reach this week. Tomorrow morning would be excellent. She smiled once more, and again I felt that something was slightly different about her smile, though I could not say what. That night I slept in a guest room with a large window that looked out at the moon. The moon hung in the dark sky, bright and round and silver. As I drifted towards sleep, I remembered what Chorus had said. The moon was moving on purpose, slightly, carefully held in some new position by a hand I could not see. I closed my eyes. I told myself there would be a simple explanation. I told myself that tomorrow I would see their little fleet and I would smile and I would compliment them and I would return to Concord Prime with a signed protectorate agreement and the gratitude of a small, charming world. I told myself many things. The old voice in the back of my mind, the one that had been with me through 11 negotiations, did not say anything at all. It had become very, very still. And in the dark that stillness felt like the worst warning of all. The shuttle that came for me the next morning was different from the small vehicle that had carried me from the landing field. This one was larger, sleeker, and entirely silent. It did not hum, it did not roar, it simply lifted from the ground as gently as a feather and slid up into the sky. Director Ademi sat beside me, calm and unhurried, sipping a hot drink from a small ceramic cup. She had offered me one as well. It was called coffee. It was dark and bitter and made my chest feel warm. "How far is the fleet stationed?" I asked her. "Past the orbit of your 8th planet." She said, "Neptune, we call it. Snort's fleet is currently in formation. Just beyond on the far side. We will be there in about 30 minutes. I stared at her. 30 minutes passed. "Neptune?" "Yes. The distance from Earth to Neptune is enormous, even with the best sublight propulsion in the Concorde. That journey takes nearly 2 full cycles of the human clock. 30 minutes was not possible. 30 minutes was a joke." "Forgive me, Director," I said, keeping my voice polite. "I do not believe my translation crystal is functioning correctly." "Did Snorts, you say 30 minutes?" "Yes, Ambassador, 30 minutes. Our transit drives are quite efficient." I sat back in my seat. I said nothing more. I did not know what to say. The shuttle did not seem to accelerate. There was no pressure pushing me back into my seat, no shaking, no rumble. Yet the view outside the small window changed quickly. The blue of Earth fell away, the gray of the moon flickered past, then there was only black with the bright distant points of stars, and then, far ahead, I began to see something else. Not stars, something nearer, something arranged. The shuttle slowed, the view in the window grew clearer, and I felt my body go cold from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. There was a structure ahead. At first I thought it was a station, a great built thing hanging in the dark. Then I realized it was not a station, it was a ship. Then I realized it was one ship among many. Then I realized that the many extended past the horizon of what my eyes could see. "Director," I said, my voice was very small, "what am I looking at?" "That is 3rd Fleet, Ambassador. We have 6 rotating fleets, 1st through 6th. Home fleet is currently in dock for refits. 3rd happens to be the closest at the moment." 6 fleets? "Yes." The shuttle drew nearer. The ships grew larger. I could not measure them at first. There was nothing to compare them to. Then the shuttle passed close to one, and I saw by its side what looked like a tiny silver speck. The speck turned out to be another vessel, perhaps the size of our embassy cruiser. The cruiser had carried me across the long dark currents between stars. The cruiser was a respectable vessel by Concorde standards, and next to this human ship, our cruiser would have looked like a child's toy beside a working machine. "How many ships in 3rd Fleet?" I asked. I did not really want to know the answer. 812 combat vessels, Ademi said calmly, plus support and supply ships, which brings the total to about 1,400. 1,400 in a single fleet, and there were 6 fleets. I tried to do the math. I could not. My mind refused. "Director," I said, the file. From our scouts, it said you had perhaps 24 ships in total, small ones. Cargo haulers, the largest no more than 100 m long." She turned her face toward me. Her dark eyes were soft, almost apologetic. "Yes, Ambassador, we are aware of what your file said. The ships your scouts saw were the only ones we allowed them to See, the rest were kept at a careful distance with their drives shut down and their hulls cooled to background temperature. We knew when the scout ship arrived. We watched it for 3 weeks. Before it noticed us, we wanted to learn how your scouts work before we revealed how we work. I stared at her. You hid them. You hid all of this from us. We hid most of it, yes. Why? She looked back out the window at her enormous fleet, because we did not know if you were friendly. We did not want to show our hand until we understood what kind of guest had arrived in our system. The shuttle continued forward. We passed a ship that must have been 10 km long. Its hull was matte black with no markings, only a long line of soft white running lights. There were openings in its sides that I now recognized as launch bays for smaller craft. Through each opening I could see racks and racks of smaller ships lined up neatly, ready to deploy. This vessel, I said, what is it called? That is the St. Catherine. She is what we call a fleet carrier. Her role is to deploy and support smaller combat craft. And how many smaller craft does she carry? 6,000 with full crews, 12,000 if we use the automated drone version. I felt sick. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, the St. Catherine had slid past and another ship had come into view. This one was different. It had no launch bays. Its hull was studded with long crystalline spines that hummed faintly, even through the vacuum of space, though that should not have been possible. And that one is the Loving Mercy. She is a long-range driver. Her main weapons are designed to deliver kinetic force at very high speeds across very long distances. How long are the distances? Across star systems, Ambassador. She does not need to be in the system. She is striking. I said nothing. I could not. I sat in the silent shuttle and watched ships slide past, each one larger and stranger than the last. There was a ship that looked like a great open lattice full of holes. Adam told me it was a defense screen ship designed to absorb and disperse enemy fire across thousands of cubic kilometers. There was a ship that seemed to ripple at its edges as if reality could not quite decide whether it was there or not. Adam told me that one was experimental and asked me gently not to look at it too long. There was a ship the size of a small moon. I asked what it was. She winced slightly as if embarrassed. That is a munitions tender, Ambassador. It carries ammunition and supplies for the rest of the fleet. It is a support ship. A support ship, a vessel the size of a small moon. In the Concord, that hull would have been the personal flagship of a high commander. I counted what I could see. I counted dreadnought equivalent ships heavy enough to lay down their own gravity. Well, I stopped counting at 400. There were more. There were far more. They stretched away into the deep dark. Line after line, layer after layer, organized in patterns that suggested every ship knew exactly where every other ship was and what it was doing. How are they coordinated? I asked. There must be thousands of crews. How do they keep formation? They mostly coordinate themselves. Adam said, the ships talk to each other. We tell them what we want and they work out the details among themselves. You mean the captains coordinate? No, I mean the ships. The ships think. Ambassador, not like we think. They think in their own way. We taught them to. They are quite good at it. We just tell them what we need and they handle the rest. I tried to imagine a fleet where the Ships themselves were thinking, where? The steel and the wires and the soft, glowing screens decided things for themselves, where the humans, my hosts, simply gave a direction and let their own machines work it out. The shuttle slowed and turned. We were facing a great curve of empty space now. And in that empty space I saw something new, lights far away in a vast arrangement, not ships, something else. What is that? I asked. Those are the building yards, Ambassador. That is where we make new ships. Right now, we have about 400 new vessels under construction. We launch a new combat ship every 6 days. A new combat ship every 6 days. The Conquered, with its 43-member civilizations and its 100,000 cycles of history, launch perhaps 30 new combat ships in a single year. The humans launched one every 6 days. And they had been doing this, by my count of the visible yards, for a very long time. Director, I said. I had to swallow before I could speak again. How long has this been going on? How long have you been building this fleet? She was quiet for a moment, then she said, we started serious construction about 90 years ago, after we heard the first Concord transmission. The Concord did not know we were listening. Of course, your communications equipment leaks, Ambassador. We picked up your scout fleet chatter when we were still using radio telescopes to do astronomy. We did not understand it at first. It took us nearly 20 years to translate. But once we did, we knew we were not alone, and we knew we were not the largest. We decided it would be wise to be prepared. Wise, I repeated faintly. It would be wise. Yes. You built this, all of this, because it would be wise. Yes, Ambassador, it seemed prudent. I sat back. My carapace had gone entirely cold. There was a small ringing sound in my head that I realized after a moment was my own blood rushing through my ears. The humans had built an end of everything fleet because it seemed prudent. They had laid down ship after ship after ship, decade after decade, in the silent dark beyond their own planet, while the rest of the galaxy talked about them as a small, charming, developing world. They had hidden it from our scouts. They had let us think they were sweet and harmless. They had invited me, the great ambassador of the Althari San Maz, to dinner, served me bread and wine, and let me deliver a speech about gentle protection from the wise Conquered, all while this fleet, this vast and ready fleet, waited in the dark behind Neptune. I felt a strange thing happen inside me. It was not fear, not exactly. It was something closer to embarrassment. I had come to this world with a thin file and a thick speech. I had come prepared to be patient with a slow young species. And these creatures, these polite and smiling creatures, had spent the entire visit gently letting me show them just how wrong I was. Director, I said, my voice was hoarse. How many of the council members yesterday were aware of this fleet? All of them, Ambassador. And the young aide, the one who asked the question about whether member worlds keep their fleets. Adame smiled just a little. She is not as young as she appeared, Ambassador. And the question was not as innocent as it sounded. She wanted us to confirm what we already suspected about how your protectorate agreements work. I closed my eyes. The whole dinner played back in my mind, every smile, every gentle question, every polite nod. They had been studying me the entire time. They had let me speak about protection and uplift and tribute, and they had simply listened, and they had taken careful notes, and they had let me believe I was the powerful one in the room. I opened my eyes. The fleet was still there. The yards were still there. The new ships were still being built even now, even as I sat in the shuttle, one every 6 days, year after year, decade after decade. There is no chair, I heard myself say. I did not understand why I said it. What was that, Ambassador? There is no chair. I should sit down. I am sitting, but I should sit down. Adame reached over and gently placed her warm hand on my arm. Take your time. Ambassador, there is no hurry. We will return to Earth when you are ready. I sat for a long while in silence, looking out at the fleet. I tried to think of the right thing to say, the right diplomatic words, the right tone. I had 90 cycles of training. I had handled 11 civilizations. There must be a phrase, a sentence, a question that fit this moment. There was not. There was no phrase in the diplomatic codes for what I was feeling. Finally, I asked the only real question, the only one that mattered. Director Adame, why did you show me this? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft and very kind. Because you came here, Ambassador, to offer us protection, and we did not want you to embarrass yourself further. We did not want to sign an agreement that pretended things were one way when they were truly another. We respect you. We respect the conquered. We would very much like to be part of something larger than ourselves, but not as a protectorate, not under any agreement that says we are weak and you are strong. We would like instead to be invited as equals, and we thought it was only fair before you made any more offers to let you see what equal looks like. I nodded slowly. I did not trust my voice. The shuttle began its long, quiet turn back toward Earth. Behind us, the fleet remained silent and ready and patient. As we slid away from it, I saw one more thing far beyond the fleet, far beyond the building yards, at the very edge of what my eyes could resolve. There was something else, a faint shape half hidden in the dark. It was vast. It was vaster than the fleet. It was vaster than the yards, and it was moving slowly, with purpose, like the moon over Earth. I did not ask what it was. Some part of me, very old and very wise, said, do not ask. Some questions are not meant for one day. I closed my eyes for the journey home. I do not remember much of the return trip to Earth. I sat in the shuttle. I looked at my hands. I noticed that they were trembling, and I held them flat against my knees so that Director Adame would not see. She did not speak. She read a small bound book made of paper, the kind humans still make, turning the pages slowly with her warm fingers. At one point she offered me a cup of the dark drink called coffee. I drank it without tasting it. When we landed at Geneva, the sun was setting. The sky was a deep orange color, and the old stone buildings glowed in the warm light. It looked again like a peaceful little world, a world of bread and wine, and children playing in green fields. The fleet behind Neptune felt very far away, but I knew now. I knew, and I could not unknow. Adame led me, not back to the round council chamber, but to a smaller building tucked behind it. This building was older. The stone was darker. The walls were thicker, and the windows were small. We entered through a heavy wooden door that opened on its own as we approached. Inside was a single room, perhaps 10 paces across, with a round wooden table at the center and 12 simple chairs around it. Most of the council was already seated, but the room was not arranged the way it had been the day before. There were no titles displayed, there were no formal robes. The humans were dressed in simple clothes, almost ordinary clothes. Alita Pritchard, the old woman with the wire hair, sat at the head of the table. The others sat in no particular order. Director Adam guided me to a chair that had been left empty for me, then took her own seat. I noticed very quickly that there were no recording devices in the room, no translation crystals other than my own, no small humming machines of any kind. The walls were bare stone, the ceiling was bare wood. The only light came from soft lamps mounted in the corners. Alita Pritchard looked at me with her calm old eyes. She did not smile, she did not bare her teeth, she simply looked at me the way an elder looks at a younger creature who has come a long way and has had a very long day. Ambassador Velthari, she said. Her voice was thin but very clear. Thank you for going to see our fleet. We know that was difficult. Please ask us anything you wish. I drew a long breath. The questions were too many. They all came at once and I had to push most of them back so that only a few could be asked. How long have you known about us? I asked. Truly known about 90 of your cycles, as Director A. Damie told you. We heard the first faint signal long ago when our radio telescopes picked up traffic from your scout fleet. It took us 20 years to translate, but we did. We have been listening ever since, quietly, carefully, without responding. And in those 90 cycles, you built that fleet. Yes. Why so much? Why so vast? The Conquered is large, yes, but it is not a force that ever made war on a world like yours. Surely a smaller fleet would have been enough. There was a long silence. The council members looked at each other. Then Alita Pritchard looked back at me, and her old eyes were very still. Ambassador, she said, when we translated the first transmissions, we did not only learn that the Conquered existed, we learned what the Conquered had done. We learned about the Tellurians. The word struck me like a soft blow. Tellurians, a name I had not heard in many cycles, a name that did not appear in current Conquered teaching, a name spoken only in old academy lectures, and even then in careful whispers. I see, I said softly. We learned about the Vosk, she continued. The Vosk, another old name, another quiet name, and the 8 sisters of Cygnus. I closed my eyes. And the quiet world, she said, and the silver swarm of Halen, and the moon, people of Hesi 3 and many others. We listened, Ambassador. For 90 cycles we listened, and we read your archives the moment our scouts gained access to them. We read what the Conquered had done to civilizations that could not say no, civilizations that were small, civilizations that were peaceful, civilizations that were welcomed in and then slowly, gently made smaller, obedient, made into something less than what they were. I did not open my eyes. I did not want to see her face, or perhaps I did not want her to see mine. You built the fleet, I said quietly, to be able to say no. Yes, Ambassador, we built the fleet to be able to say no and to mean it. You did not build it to attack. No, we did not build it to attack. You do not want to attack. We do not want to attack. We are tired. Ambassador, we are very tired of fighting. We spent 10,000 of our own years fighting each other. We finally stopped only a few generations ago. We do not want to start again with new neighbors. We very much want to be at peace. We just wanted to be sure that if the choice were taken from us, we could take it back. I opened my eyes. I looked around the room at these strange small creatures, these polite mammals with their bread and wine and their unsettling tooth-showing smiles, and I felt something shift inside me, something I had not felt in a very long time. It was the feeling of being seen by people who understood me better than I had understood them. Then what do you want from they? Conquered, I asked. A man on the other side of the table answered. It was Aldous Pemberton, the chief legal advisor. He was a tall, thin man with gray hair and steady gray eyes. He spoke slowly and carefully. Membership, he said, full, equal. Voting, full. We will pay our share of the common funds. We will send a delegation to your council halls. We will sit on the same committees as any other member. World, we will contribute to the common defense as you have seen, and generously we will share our technology where it is welcomed, and we will respect the customs of older members. We will be in every way a good member, but not a protectorate, not a follower, not a small charming world that is gently made smaller over time. An equal member or no member at all. And in return you ask for what? Pemberton paused. He looked at Elena Pritchard. She nodded slightly. He looked back at me. In return, he said, we ask only one additional thing. We ask that the Conquered open its archives, that the practices of the past be reviewed, that the older civilizations explain to themselves and to all members what was done to the Tellurians and the Vosk and the others, and that going forward such practices stop. We are not asking for trials. We are not asking for punishments. We are asking only that the Conquered look at itself honestly. We will help. We will sit on the review committee. If you allow us, we will be patient, but we want the practices to stop. I sat very still. I had imagined on the long shuttle ride from the fleet that the humans would make some great threat, that they would demand a high price, that they would use the weight of their ships to crush some unfair advantage out of us. They could have demanded almost anything. They could have demanded the throne of the Conquered itself, and I am not sure we could have refused. Instead, they had asked us to look at ourselves. They had asked us to be better. They had asked us gently to behave. It was the kindest demand I had ever heard, and in some strange way it was the heaviest. And if the Conquered refuses, I asked. I had to ask. It was my duty. Elena Pritchard answered. Her voice was as soft as the lamplight. If the Conquered refuses, Ambassador, nothing happens, nothing at all. We will not attack you. We will not threaten you. We will simply continue as we are. We will trade with whoever wishes to trade with us. We will share our technology with whoever wishes to learn. We will offer our friendship to any member world that chooses to know us. But we will not join. And in 200 cycles, when the deep dark currents bring some old danger toward your member worlds, an old danger that none of you remembers because the records have been hidden for so long, we will not be there. We will hear your call, and we will stay home. We will tend our gardens. We will love our children. We will let the Conquered face it alone. She paused. Her old eyes held mine. We hope it will not come to that. We are not a vengeful people, Ambassador. Despite what our long history might suggest, we have grown tired of small spites and old grudges. We would vary. Much like to know you, we would vary. Much like to be your neighbors, but we will not be your protectorate. We will not kneel, and we will not pretend that what was done to the Tellurians does not matter, simply because it was long ago. I sat back in my chair. I looked at the wood of the ceiling. I thought of my long career. I thought of the 11 worlds I had welcomed into the conquered. I thought of the speeches I had given about protection and partnership and the gentle hand of older brothers. I thought of how confidently I had given those speeches, how sure I had been that I was doing good work, how little I had ever questioned what came after when the cameras were off and the celebrations had ended and the new member world began. The slow, quiet process of becoming what we wanted them to become. I had never asked myself in 90 cycles whether what I was doing was kind. I had only ever asked whether it was working. I would like a glass of water, I said. Director Ademi rose at once and brought me a small glass of cool water. I drank it slowly. My hand did not shake as much. Now the water was clean and tasted of nothing, which was a relief. I will recommend acceptance, I said quietly. The council members did not cheer. They did not smile. They did not look triumphant. They simply looked at me with calm, grateful eyes and nodded. Thank you, Ambassador Aliana, Pritchard said. I cannot guarantee what the conqueror will decide, but I will recommend it. I will recommend full membership, and I will recommend the review you have asked for. That is all we have asked. Thank you. I sat for a few more moments, then I asked the last question, the one I had not been able to push down. The thing I saw beyond the fleet, beyond the building yards, far out at the edge, what is it? The council members looked at each other. Again there was a long silence. Then Aliana Pritchard answered. Ambassador, we would prefer not to discuss that today. It is not a threat. It is not a weapon. It is a project of ours that we hope in time you will come to understand. For now, please accept that some questions have their own seasons. We will tell you about it when the season is right. I nodded slowly. I did not press. There was something in her voice that suggested the answer, when it came, would be even larger than the fleet, and I was not sure my old heart could hold any more largeness today. We rose. I bowed to the council. They bowed back. Director Ademi walked me to the door in the hallway outside before we returned to the main building. She stopped and turned to me. Her face was warm and kind and a little tired. Ambassador, she said, I am sorry. For what, Director? For all of this, for letting you give the speech yesterday, for making you go through this. We thought it was the best way. We hoped you would notice on your own. You see, we hoped you would see the orbital ring and the moon and the Mars lights, and you would ask. We left signs everywhere. We hoped you would understand without us having to show you the fleet. We do not enjoy what happened on the shuttle today. We did not want to embarrass you. I considered her for a long moment. Director Ademi, I said, yesterday you slid a chair under me when my legs would not hold me up. I did not thank you at the time. I should have. Thank you for the chair and for being kind when you did not have to be. Her dark eyes grew slightly wet. She nodded once and could not seem to speak. It is I who should apologize, I continued, for not asking for not noticing, for arriving here so sure of what I would find that I could not see. What was really here, I am older than you, director. I have seen more star systems than you have seen continents. And yet you have taught me more in 2 days than my own elders taught me in 90 cycles. I owe you a debt for that. There is no debt, ambassador. We are simply glad you came. So am I, director, so am I. She walked me back to my guest room. I did not sleep that night. I sat by the window and watched the moon, which moved on purpose, slightly carefully held in some new orbit by a hand that I now understood to be human. I returned to Concord Prime 3 days later. The journey back felt longer than the journey out. I spent most of it in my cabin, writing my report by hand on smooth paper the way the older diplomats used to. I did not trust the recording crystals. I wanted every word to come slowly through my fingers so that I would have to think about each one before I said it down. Korath came to see me twice. Each time he asked quietly whether I was well. Each time I told him I was. Each time he did not believe me, but he was kind enough not to press. When we arrived at Concord Prime, I was met at the docking ring by a small staff officer who informed me that the coordinator wished to see me at once. There would be no rest. There would be no chance to clean my robes or order my thoughts. The coordinator wanted to know what I had learned, and he wanted to know now. I followed the officer through the long, pale corridors of the central building. We passed many familiar walls. We passed the great window that looked out at the bright blue gas giant the coordinator's homeworld orbited. We passed the small alcove where I had often paused to gather myself before important meetings. I did not pause this time. I did not feel the need. I was led to the same quiet briefing room where only a few months earlier the coordinator had handed me the thin file. On Earth, the room looked exactly the same. The walls were still soft gray. The lights were still low. The dry flowers on the side table had been replaced with fresh ones, but they were the same kind and the same arrangement. The coordinator was already seated at the table. He rose as I entered, gave me the slight formal bow of an elder to a respected colleague, and gestured for me to sit. He looked tired. He had always been thin, but he seemed thinner now, and the deep lines under his eyes were a little deeper. Velthari, he said. He used my first name, which was unusual. Welcome back. I have been waiting for your report. We have heard rumors. There are some unusual energy readings from Sol that have made our scout fleet nervous. I hope you can explain them. I can, coordinator. I will. May I speak freely? Of course. I took a long breath. Then I told him everything. I did not soften anything. I told him about the moon that moved on purpose. I told him about the ring around Earth and the 800 million people living on Mars and the polite council members who had taken careful notes. During my speech, I told him about the dinner of bread and wine and the young aide with her sharp question and the quiet older woman with the wire hair. I told him about the shuttle ride to Neptune in 30 minutes. I told him about Third Fleet. I told him about the carrier called St. Catherine and the long-range driver called Loving Mercy. I told him about the support ship, the size of a small moon, and Snorts, the building yards launching new combat vessels every 6 days. I told him about the ships that thought for themselves and the experimental ship that I had been asked not to look at too Long. I told him about the meeting in the small old building with the bare stone walls. I told him about the offer. Membership, full equal voting with one additional condition, a review. Certain old practices the conquered no longer like to discuss. I told him about the Tellurians. I told him that the humans had read the archives and remembered what had been done. I told him that they had built their fleet not to attack, but to be able to say no. I told him at the end about the chair. Director Adamy had slid under me when my legs would not hold me up. The coordinator listened without interrupting. His chromatophores grew paler and paler as I spoke. By the time I was finished, his face was almost white. He sat very still for a long while, looking down at his folded hands. "Are you certain, Velthari?" he asked. "Finally, are you certain of all of this?" I sat in a chair on their flagship. "Coordinator, I drank their fermented grape juice, I am certain." 6 Fleet. 6 Coordinator, with home fleet currently in dock, so 7 if you count the docked one. And they could end us. Yes, Coordinator, they could. They have chosen not to. They have asked instead to join. He was silent for a long time. The dry flowers on the side table made a soft sound as the air moved through them. Outside the window, the great blue gas giant turned slowly in its long, quiet orbit. "What is your recommendation?" he asked. At last. "Acceptance, Coordinator, full membership, equal voting, and the review." "They have asked for the review." "Yes. You know what that will mean if the archives are opened, if the practices are examined, if the older members are asked to explain what they did to the Tellurians, to the Vosk, to the others." "I know, Coordinator. There will be questions. There will be old wounds reopened. There will be member worlds who will be angry. Yes. It may shake the conquered deeply. It may, Coordinator, but I believe the conquered can withstand it. I believe in fact that the conquered will be stronger. After, I believe we have been carrying these old wrongs for a long time, and they have grown heavy. Setting them down, even painfully, may help us walk further than we have walked in many cycles." The Coordinator looked at me for a long moment, then he made a small, soft sound that I realized after a beat was a quiet laugh. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh an elder makes when a younger one has surprised him. "Velthari sound Maz," he said. "You sound like one of them." "Coordinator," I replied, "I sound like someone who has been to Saul and come back. There is a difference, but it is small, and it is getting smaller every day." He nodded slowly. He drew the thin folder from the table, the same folder he had given me months before. He looked at it, then he set it carefully aside. "I will bring your recommendation to the full council," he said. "I cannot promise they will accept it. There will be loud voices against. There will be older members who will not want the archives opened. There will be those who will say we should refuse, who will say the humans are bluffing, who will say we should test them. They are not bluffing, Coordinator. I believe you, but I will need to convince others. I will help." He nodded. He looked tired, but he also looked somehow lighter, as if a weight he had not known he was carrying had shifted slightly off his shoulders. I left the briefing room. I walked out into the long, pale corridor. I passed the great window. I paused there just for a moment, and I looked out at the blue gas giant and the bright, distant stars. I thought of the moon and Earth, moving on purpose, held in its new orbit by a hand I could not see. I thought of the fleet behind Neptune, silent and ready and patient. I thought of the building yards launching one new ship every 6 days, year after year for 90 long cycles. And I thought of Director Adami in her simple dark green clothes walking beside me across a gray paved circle on a warm spring afternoon, smiling her unsettling, tooth-showing smile, asking me carefully about my journey. I had come to her world certain of what I would find. I had found something else entirely. I had found a species that could end us, and that chose every day to set the table instead. I had found a species that built a fleet not for conquest but for the right to say no. I had found a species that, given the choice between fear and friendship, had reached for friendship while still keeping its hand quietly near a great and terrible reserve. I am old now. I do not know how many more cycles I have left. I do not know what the council will decide. I do not know what will become of the review, or of the old practices, or of the long, silent question of what the conquered has been and what it might choose to be. But I know this. On the day I learned that humans controlled a fleet that could end worlds, I did not feel fear. I felt something stranger and softer and more lasting. I felt grateful that on the day a young species came of age in this galaxy and discovered it was stronger than its elders, it chose, for reasons of its own, to be kind about it, to slide a chair under the elder when the elder's legs gave way, to ask gently for the elder to do better, to wait patiently for the elder to hear. May they continue to find us worth their kindness. May we slowly become worth it. This is the report of Ambassador Velthary Soundmez of the conquered of civilized worlds on the matter of Earth, the small charming world that turned out to be neither small nor charming, but something far more wonderful and far more frightening, and in the end far more welcome than any of us had dared to hope. End of report.